celluloid, and we're turning it into music and podcast for you.
Welcome everyone to another fine episode of We Came From Celluloid. For those of you who don't remember, I am Nicky P here with Brian Pritchard, and we have been off on an adventure, an excursion, an illusion, perhaps even. And we're here to talk to you about it today. Welcome, everyone.
Good to be back, Nick. Good to be back. Weird to see you in this at this remove, after such close proximity. We are once again in different rooms, different places, little boxes on a computer screen.
Not in the shotgun seat of the van. Getting hip damage and all kinds of other uncomfortable. This is yeah, it has definitely been a bit of a shift. And I think a lot of people would kind of think maybe vacation shift. But it's kind of a mental shift in a bunch of different ways. I was back to work yesterday and it was all right, it wasn't a big deal. But there's a certain sense of like, I'm definitely amped up about like band stuff still. Like ready to kind of take on new chapters and like work on the next thing and see what else we can kind of squeeze out of the orange, so to speak. So it's been I don't know, a weird sort of shift for me. How about yourself? How's that feeling?
I've been all over the place, honestly, throughout the experience. I had been teasing my wife during the couple of weeks leading up to the tour because she had been with my daughter out of town doing the last of these road trip dance competitions that they've actually done several times, but this was like the climax, the last one. And hearing her, like, she would check in with me and like every other message would be, this amazing thing just happened, or I hate these people, you know what I mean? Like, and it would pivot back and forth that way. And I would tease her about the sort of whiplash feeling of it all. And so, what I'm talking about in that respect is just that, like, I felt every emotion throughout that 10-day period at different times, in terms of how stressed I felt, how sad I felt, how unbelievably excited and grateful I felt, how much fun I had and laughter I had, and also times where my fucking hands were shaking with anger, about different things. And I was very much all over the place, and I was thinking about how I was so flippant almost and light about like talking about this idea of being like when we last recorded, being like, hey, like this is like the old version of us, and like when we come back it'll be the new version. Like in a certain way, I almost, like where I use the word flippant, I didn't even, I think, appreciate how much would be hitting me so quickly in such a short period of time. One other way I'll try to explain it is like, I've recognized before how there's things you can learn in band practice over long stretches of time, but then a single onstage performance, you can learn so much faster about things. Like, that's an experience I've had before where you go like, oh man, like what condensed learning you get when you actually take a thing out into the field. And high level, that's a takeaway here too, is that all the months of talking, planning, thinking, speculating, that condensed learning was intense. It was intense for me, dude.
Well, to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, that for me, it's the sense of iteration That's the important thing. You get like, it's one thing to kind of go out there, and when we play shows periodically, we play a show, and by the next show, I've kind of forgotten some of the lessons I learned. So like when I make changes, it's like they're all kind of a little bit amorphous. Whereas getting out there to go out and do the show every night for the most part, I can make changes every night based on what last night was like, and kind of tweak on the fly and see exactly, almost real time, like what the differences are, how things work out. And certainly by the end of the tour, like I know that my performances were, maybe my voice was getting a little weaker as the week went on. Surprisingly, not as bad as I thought it would, but the personality behind the performance was definitely picking up with each iteration, because I was more comfortable with the songs, more comfortable with the emotions, more comfortable with like what is it mean to be the lead singer of Puma Thurman,
Like that. No, even something as simple as I sort of defied a request that multiple people had made for a variety of reasons. Some of them practical, some of them just, I don't know. I don't know what the other word would be, but so where I'm going is something like the Setlist spontaneity, right? That more than one band member had talked about their preference being to have a defined set that we dialed in and then executed on every night. That's not what we did, and there were different reasons for that. Like I said, some of that, like high level, my preference is always airs a little bit towards the spontaneity. I do like, both in a practice setting and even in a show setting, having some room to call an audible. I like being able to pick the mood of a song based on the mood right in that moment. Even if the set list is defined, the idea of it being a moodier version of Cowboy or a intense version of Cowboy, or you know what I'm saying? Like I like being able to fuck with those things, and but yeah, like it was cool. We debuted a song that we hadn't performed live. So that was a level of spontaneity, right? That proved to present itself. And then to your point about the iteration of it, like getting to talk about what we didn't like in that performance so that we could go after it again. We did the same thing with Renee, where I hadn't really intended to include Renee in the tour at all. We did end up playing it twice, I think, as well, just like 12-12, where once it had been introduced at all, I had that desire, recognizing the opportunity you describe, where it was like, oh shit, we've got another show tomorrow. Like, we absolutely have now this opportunity to build off of that momentum in interesting ways. Similarly, it was cool to look at our tour mate. Amelia performed on stage by herself, as I'd seen her do previously. And then we had conversations about having been as an onstage presence. And then I got to watch them experiment that with that approach night one. Have takeaways from that initial experiment that they have then applied to the next performance. And then, leading that into conversations, for the future. I'd be curious, what Joe's perspective on that was, because again, he was more in that camp of going, I've got in-ear monitors, I've got a set list that I'm executing on, but yeah, that part was indeed interesting to get to. And, I've come away speculating about that stuff with bands that I like. I won't look up a set list for the Deftones before my show, but once I've seen my show, I like to see what were the set lists that led up to this? And then I'll pay attention to what they do the next night and for the rest of the tour. And I'm always curious about what the bands I like and their decision-making process, and which ones kind of reinvent the wheel every night, and which ones, do have a prescribed set list, or within that, like maybe it's 90% prescribed, but they have a slot or two that they leave open for a semi wild card. But then is it a true wild card, or is it just like option A, option B for some reason? I find all those things interesting, and it was cool getting to execute on it in our space. Set lists are honestly just one of my favorite parts of what we do. I enjoy that shit.
Yeah, I've always been a 10 to 20% guy. Like, because in any performance, like, there's you need to have built in sort of peaks and valleys. Your introductions and your outros should be very well rehearsed and it should feel special. And it's difficult for things to feel special when they're just kind of haphazardly thrown together. But there's also a certain amount of, yeah, but you don't want every set to be exactly the same. So you put your 10 to 20% of wiggle room in there of things to kind of call on the fly, or maybe like you said, the emotion in the room is a little different. So, you kind of tweak around how the middle of the set goes a little bit, maybe push a song later, put one a little earlier. We haven't played this, but this feels like the right night to play something special and different. Let's do that tonight. So it was definitely, I think if we had more dates, like it was the longest tour, we had 5 gigs, but I think if we had like a longer run, we would have had a little bit more time to even then to experiment with like what that really looks like. But when you got 5 so different gigs, like, one of them's in an art space at a bookshop. One of them's in this punk bar across from like where they're having a huge party for the the soccer. One of them's a bar in Chicago. One of them was in a guy's apartment above a bar in Denver, as we're playing off of a balcony to a park across the street. So like the situations were so drastically different in some ways. It provided almost like too wide a swath of different types of venues to like really just sit back on any one concept.
Now, even the acts that we were flanked by, like, you know what I mean? Like the first night show in Indiana, I remember just, looking at the other acts on the bill and feeling like some of our songs, that I was wanting to construct a set list again to try to fit in to whatever degree was logical.
One thing I definitely want to bring up is, because obviously I'm the one who has the strong personality, like really, really dark coffee. And was quite concerned with like some of the interpersonal machinations of the tour. And how that was going to work out. I thought for sure me and one of the members of the band were probably going to get into it. Even going into that first couple hours, I'm like, oh god, this is going to happen, isn't it? And lo and behold, it didn't. Like things chilled out really quick. Everyone kind of settled, I think, into, hey, let's just kind of keep the peace mode and just keep things light and airy and get through all this. Now, do I say that everything was all apple pie and roses the whole no? Even moments where you and me were getting pissed at each other because like we all have different expectations of communication and things. Like, so I'm getting talked at by people and you're kind of handled something, but it didn't disperse past a certain point, so I'm freaking out because I'm like, God, I don't know what the fuck to tell these people, and like I gotta come to you, and you're like in the middle of doing something that you don't want to be pulled away from, and so there were those moments where I think everyone kind of got pushed in some ways to kind of have to do uncomfortable things. That being said, I think everybody walked away largely, feeling good about how everything went for everybody. I can't speak for you, I suppose, but ultimately I'm not any more pissed at anyone in the band than I was when I went out. And generally feel pretty good.
No, in a way, I would, I guess part of my, it's funny saying this because ironically, one of the things that even came up as a squabble of sorts was, and I guess you're even talking about it now that there's a degree to which, as one of the planners, that there's a leadership hat that's being worn, right? Where I take on that mantle at times, and then there's moments where it's like I don't feel like having the people turn to me to look for that information. You know what I mean? But anyway, like I say that to say that, like,
Just in fairness, I would normally have, because I had like, this whole thing kind of stemmed with you and Joe. I was leaning out of leadership mode more than I normally would. Like I would normally have been the guy in your position in most of the shows, but since you were the guy who'd been making the contacts, it kind of fell on you.
no, for sure, for sure, for sure.
And one of the issues I'll say is Brian. Everyone, if you haven't gathered this from our podcast, Brian is a sweetheart, and Brian goes out wanting to make everybody happy, and sometimes that can cause issues. And like, well, we have very strict time requirements that you should be getting things done in, and you know, when you're trying to kind of make everybody happy, you're inevitably pissing somebody off because something's not going the way they thought it was going to. And I'm perfectly content to be the asshole in any situation because I usually am. So I mean, it's one of the things is what would have looked what would look different in this situation where I take that on and do things differently. That being said, like we're talking about some of the most minor shit people like set times running too long kind of stuff here.
No, and that's all I mean is in answer to your question, that was a long way of my saying, I still feel like I need to have some individual check-ins. Like I haven't talked to Brian since he vanished in the middle. Not that's I don't mean that literally. Like we knew he was leaving, but he had a middle of the night flight. So it was like we were hanging out, and then he wasn't part of the drive home. So like Brian's just somebody that I do want to check in with as everybody settles in and go like you and I are talking right now. I want to have that conversation with everybody. That's all I mean. You know what I mean? And so that checking of the pulse is something that still needs to happen as I sort of just reacclimate to the normal world. But no, I mean to your point, even with like my tendency with the people I love as it relates to conflict resolution is to not let things lie sit. I'll put it this way. If there's somebody that I value the relationship, I will put work into mending any damage that has been done to the degree to which I can control that. It would be exceptionally rare for me to sit there and have a conflict or something where my answer is, well, just fuck that person. I'm never going to talk to them again. This, that, or the other. You know what I mean? And so I guess from that perspective, that's what allowed me to be flippant going into the tour when you would talk about the idea of like people coming away angry or whatever. It was like, well, I have so much history that the idea that like somehow those relationships could completely deteriorate in that time. Indeed, it seemed impossible, is impossible. It's like, from my perspective, no, like that's not something I would ever allow. All that being said, it was a unique enough experience. Like I said earlier, it was such, for me, even an intense, concentrated thing that I just do want to check in with everybody and be like, yeah, how are you feeling? Would you fucking do that again or not? You know what I mean? Like, Yeah.
Well, I was definitely less concerned with you as far as that goes because obviously we're going into this. You've known these guys for your entire freaking life at this point, whereas somebody for me who in large ways is an outsider. And I'm trying to kind of make friends with your friends in a lot of ways along this tour. And there's some members of the band that like I definitely have more of a rapport with. We have more shared experience, more time together. Obviously, you and me have the most out of anyone I have shared experience with. Um, but like, there's certain band members I think we even discussed that are just kind of a mystery. Like, I'm not sure if they actually like me, don't like me, whatever. And so, I figure, well, we're sure as hell gonna find that test while we're out here, and it never came.
Dude, no, I remember feeling that way with Third World Leader when I was in the band as well. I remember talking to somebody at one point about being like, there's things that come up conversationally that I feel like if I probed them too far, it would like break this thing that I really like, and so I don't. I remember saying that about them. So I'm not even assuming that that's your sentiment. It just reminded me of that sense of number one, like I love being part of these different creative projects, and yeah, it's an interesting thing to try to. I haven't quite been in that position as an adult outside of different like business scenarios, right? Like I've been lucky, and Third World Leader, that was the exception to the rule, right? That was the time where I had a project where I wasn't surrounded by my fucking childhood friends, right? And I had to figure out how to navigate personalities and stuff. So yeah, I do have empathy, even if limited experience with it.
What I find amusing is there's probably the same reason that you would have had issues in that group. I expected to have issues with our band member too.
No, that's fair.
Just
Yeah.
just by what I know of those guys in Third World Leader, and what I know of this is like, oh yeah, no, that could have been. I can see a problem for Brian. So, yeah, no, dude, I'm not gonna say like I definitely walked away from this having at least kind of one relationship that I feel. I don't know. It wasn't really that there was necessarily a relationship there before, but like I could sense that at least one member of the tour and me were reaching the end of what we could take with each other, and it will. I won't go into any more depth than that, but so it didn't come from where I actually expected it to come from, but there was a certain amount of that. I think it's inevitable that you're going to have some of that in any situation where you have people locked in a van for really, really long periods of time. Or, well, that's about as much of them as I think I can take for right now.
Yeah, well, and that came into my mind too, right? As far as just broadly speaking, I thought of the small doses nature of things, right? Being part of what was tested, right? In that context is going like, got it. Whatever personality stuff meshes or doesn't mesh to different degrees, inside any relationship, you look at how friendships get tested by becoming roommates, that romantic relationships get tested by moving in with each other, the idea that a band gets tested by spending 24 hours a day locked in a van, locked in these what I mean, sort of confined circumstances. It does make sense. It makes sense that is a thing that you can't fully know what is going to happen until you go in and do it, and we did it.
Well, and that's sad. Like, surprisingly, like, it's not like people weren't hanging out with each other outside of, the gigs and the performing. Chicago, you guys all went and did your little scooter tour and had a blast doing it. We, while we were out in Denver, we went out to the hills kind of as a group and looked at the mountains and stuff. And that was its own little bit of blast. So it's, it's not like even when there were opportunities to spend time apart that like most of us chose them. I'm perhaps like the most internal out of all of us, as far as like I kind of need to be by myself, guys, and do my own thing a bit. Um, but even I, like, still finding excuses to go out and hang with everybody. So, when it all was said and done, like, it was, I don't feel like any relationships were really ruined, if not only just built upon further. There was more shared experience built than taken away, I guess.
I think so too. And I feel almost guilty that in the immediate aftermath that I haven't had more of a sense of just embracing the joy and all the wonderful highlights, because there were so many of them. But I'm just being honest that there's been somewhat more of like a shell shock, like, you know what I mean, sort of sense of just coming back and going, what the fuck just happened, and part of that I acknowledged right before the call is the intersection with I talk about the table legs of my world being my creative self, whatever I'm doing to make money in business at any given time, and then my family, my heart, my wife, my kids, my closest relationships, right? And I'm at my happiest when all of those ingredients are, nothing's ever perfect. It's not about that, but just like there's times where things feel stable, and there's times that things feel shaky and wobbly, right? To keep the table metaphor going, okay? And the professional, where my ability to pay bills and stuff like that, table leg is in a really, uh, for me right now, wobbly place. And I feel good about the future in part because that's just who I am, right? It's like I try not to let my negative imagination run wild, but moments that feel shaky, again, kind of freak me out. And so the overlay, in fact, of having so much intensity with the band, which is such a critical part of just my ability to feel balanced and well as a human being, also placed in, without overthinking the word too much, what felt like a vulnerable spot. All of that just leaves me, like I said, in a position right now of just almost clinging to the anchors that I have. And what I'm grateful for is that ultimately, even with aspects of what we were doing with the band, making that table leg wobbly and uncertain, like just because of what we were doing being forging new ground, I am grateful that the relationships do still feel like anchors in my world, right? The individual relationships with the human beings, on an individual level, certainly continue to feel like anchors. What I'm curious about for myself, and like I said, checking the pulse individually, is what everybody's takeaways were about just some of the directional stuff. You and me talk about, and it remains a goal of mine. When we went to Red Rocks, when we were standing outside that bookstore in Sioux Falls, I don't know if you noticed what was on their door was some local music festival being advertised, where whoever the headliners were, I don't even remember. They weren't like huge acts, you know what I mean? But it was like 100 bands you'd never heard of, and then this headliner. And I'm pointing at it and going like, yeah, those are the sort of things that I'm interested in as that next level up, that I want to be able to be on festival sort of bills. I want to play for audiences, right? Like you and I talked about that idea of going like, shit, what one takeaway is what if we looked at all the money we spent on this entire run, and if one of the desired outcomes was getting new fans, getting evangelical-level fans that feel the same way about Puma Thurman that I feel about Deftones and Queens of the Stone Age, where I go tell people about them. I shout their name from the rooftops. I wanted those types of fans. I don't know that I got them, and so I feel like even there, like, would spending the money on marketing tactics and list building and other methods of getting the audience be the smarter thing to do before contemplating another version of this again, and with that in mind, once again checking in with all the guys and going like, would you do this again? Would you do this again? Would you do this again? Would you do this again?
Well, to that extent, one of the positives certainly is that your son coming along and gathering footage for various things is going to make a lot of the things we've needed necessary to do this something that we have. Like, shortly before tour, I didn't have much time to do anything with it. We finally got a band photo, like a photo of the band together. That was something like why we didn't have 10 years ago. It baffles me, but like it's been hard one to get. Having good, solid live footage, in quantities it'll be useful to us has been something we haven't had. And one of the best ways to make a video to promote yourself on, like, any of the short form media place out there is to have live video. You don't have to have even live music, but live video so you can see the performance is something we haven't had access to. We've just kind of had crappy phone videos that like were not taken by people with auteur eyes, we'll just say. In crappy dark lit rooms, people not paying a whole lot of attention. We actually got some of the basis for an actual music video finally for one of our songs. So it's like there's a lot of things that we gathered that I personally feel like are going to be able to help take us to that next level where we can start doing some of the promotional things that we need to do to get what we're looking for as far as starting to actually build a fan base. I'll tell anybody, I think that you and I got what we wanted and expected out of this trip, which was to build relationships. That was the thing that we knew we had to walk away with, because we knew we weren't going to sell out every room. We walked away with, we know people in town that we can start. We won't start from nothing. We can start with, hey, I got a guy we can talk to there. We learn, we've got lessons. Like, dude, I know next time I do a tour, there will not be any of this 10-hour day crap. I will book a small venue in between there in some town, and we will find a way to make that viable. Even if it's just like we stop so that you and me can play a bookstore by ourselves and do an acoustic set. Like, there's no need to spend all day on the road when there's so many damn cities in the U.S. So one of the things I want to start doing is putting together my map of like, these are all the places within 5 hours of each other across the country, so that we can start, playing different loops in there if so be it. That's the kind of stuff that, like, one of the things that we learned was, I asked going into, should I bring my PA system, just in case. And the consensus was, no, we got to preserve face. 100%, I should have brought my own PA system, because there were just situations where learning somebody else's, because the guy who normally runs it was at the gig across the street, would have been a hell of a lot easier on us to just know what we're going in there with and know how the equipment works. And it would have been a lot less stress going into situations.
No, three of the 5 venues. You know what I mean? We could have used that. Yeah, you're right.
And then that's like a thing that, like, I know from years of doing the cover band gig, but wasn't sure it was necessarily transferable to what we were doing. In retrospect, it was very transferable and definitely would have been helpful. So, all in all, like, the lessons learned, man, like I'm frankly very excited for, what the opportunities I think we can make for ourselves in the future based on what we learned doing this.
Me too. And one of the highlights, I'll go ahead and pay you the compliment. Like, to whatever degree you were worried about doing multiple shows, you sounded consistent and great every night. I thought we crushed it in terms of performances. From a planning perspective, right? You acknowledged it. I overdid it in terms of trying to book 4 acts. You know what I mean on every night and stuff like that. You know what I mean? That was one of my lessons, is going, got it. I would probably be a little bit more selfish, knowing some of the extra pressure that it created for me. In terms of, if I'm gonna wear the multiple hats of also being the guy booking the shows, promoting and stuff like that, I probably wouldn't be trying to represent the interests of multiple bands again.
Exactly, and that's one of the things, we'll say was definitely a common, a big thing for me and Levy. It's like you feel like you have to advocate for 3 different groups on the bill, and sometimes your bandmates like, nah, dude, I just want you to advocate for the band that I'm in, because that's what the hell I want, and I'm not mad at you in any respect for any, like, the uncomfortableness that became of that, because number one, you didn't really know until you're there, but moreover, you created opportunity for musicians that might not have ever had that opportunity before. So, I'm lenient certainly in that. So, I'm glad Melodite got to go out and learn kind of with us in a lot of ways.
Well, and it's not just her again. Like, the Sioux Falls example, it was everybody. It was ultimately just that, as a person, I'm willing to set aside my needs for what I perceive as the greater good. So in that moment, it was prioritizing, what does the venue want? How do I take care of the local band that showed up and brought some local people to help us, in addition to Ironworm, who has their own tour, and I invited on this thing, and and then our 3 acts being Melodite, Dome, and Puma, that I was trying to include within our traveling unit. My good intentions sometimes overlaid with the practicalities of it's just so interesting, and I'm no stranger to it, even on a local level, how quickly the best laid plans of it all can go awry. That we show up with a plan in mind, and a timeline, and a schedule, and it's like, I always laughed over the years at these like 15-minute set changes that they build into things, and you go like, if I'm the last band on the bill, I know that by the time it gets to me, things will be like an hour off fucking course by then. You know what I mean? So I try not to be that guy when it's my show, but I still definitely made clumsy mistakes. So it is what it is.
All right, boss. Well, I've got the wife calling me, so I think it is about that time for today. Look forward to catching up with you next week. Everybody, watch out for this episode. Watch out for the artist episode. I can't remember who it is this week, but we got somebody we're talking to.
So we've got some good ones, queued up. I know that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, take it easy, folks.
And we're turning it into music and podcast for you.